We're living in crazy times, a chaotic world, and a big reason so many people are struggling is because they haven't dealt with their inner child. The inner child is just an aspect of you that's stuck at age 7 or below within your psyche. In this video, we're going to break down what that is and how to heal it, and how healing it might be the key you need to unlock all those goals that you've been dreaming about without the self-sabotage. I want to start off with this quote here that's often attributed to Aristotle. It says, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." If you pay attention to a lot of people, especially friends that you've had since you were young, you might have noticed that certain mannerisms or patterns that they displayed when they were younger continued into their adult life. This is because a lot of our core beliefs, a lot of our core wounds, our thinking processes are already sealed by age 7. When you're born, your brain is basically like a blank slate. It's this malleable piece of material that can then be formed and changed throughout your life, especially as you go through different experiences. If you don't do deep inner work, those experiences will continue and direct the trajectory of a life. And especially when it regards to the inner child. But to understand the inner child, we need to see ourselves as fragmented selves. And this is a very powerful concept that I like to use. Basically, there is no single I. There is no center place that you can say that this is me. Especially at the highest level, you might have heard in Eastern teachings, a lot of these Buddhists and supposedly enlightened individuals, they talk about how the I is an illusion. I haven't experienced that, but this is what they say at the highest level. But as we bring it down to more human levels, you will even see that this idea of I, this idea of self, this ego that you have is basically an ensemble of different personalities that differ. There are so many different versions of yourself. I always ask people, when you talk to your best friends, do you talk in the same way to your partner? Or the way you talk to your partner, do you talk in the same way to your parents? Or the way you talk to your parents, do you talk to your children that way? Your cat or dog, your lawyer, your Uber driver? The answer is always a unanimous no. We show different versions of ourselves to different people. Even when you're doing a customer service, call, like let's say you're dealing with your phone provider or whatever, the voice you put on typically sounds different to the voice you might have when you're just having a general conversation. You have like a professional voice. This is normal. We change our personalities. Different aspects of ourselves come out to face the different challenges we encounter in life. If someone was to film you with a hidden camera, this would be very obvious and would look quite interesting indeed. The same phenomena is also the reason behind our darker natures. Throughout history, we are often shocked and bewildered by genocides, holocausts, inhuman acts of war, weird experiments. You might have a Milgram experiment or different types of experiments where people are put into a situation where there's an authority figure and they're forced to do things, or they make these decisions that they normally wouldn't make, that are perhaps seen as cruel or evil.
You're gonna get a shock, 180 volts. Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man, eh? You hear him hollering? He's
As I said before, the shocks may be painful, but they're not dangerous.
They're hollering. He can't stand it. What if something happens to him?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we must go on until he's learned all the word
I
pairs.
refuse.
Continue, please.
All right, next one. Slow. Wrong. Answer is neck. 300 volts.
See these acts of human nature and we're shocked, like how is this possible? How can we behave like this? That's because we have deeper, darker aspects of ourselves that we don't let come out in certain situations, such as war, such as a couple years ago when things were hitting the fan. You start seeing people's darker nature come out because the environment almost acts like a trigger to bring out that alter, which we'll talk about in a second. A good book on this topic is called The Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo. It's a really great one that touches on the darker aspect of human nature. Now, something that you might have heard of before is called dissociative identity disorder. It used to be called multiple personality disorder, or people used to just call it that. And it's basically when someone has several different personalities or different versions of themselves that are quite distinct. A movie that really popularized this was the movie Split, which was a fictional movie, and had this guy crawling on walls and basically being stronger than Ronnie Coleman, which isn't really realistic, but it highlighted in an exaggerated way this aspect of alters that happens to people with DID. So people who have DID, it typically happens through some sort of highly traumatic, often repetitive childhood events, really bad, usually probably some satanic type stuff that happened before the person's like age 3. And for some reason, the psyche develops this defense mechanism where it creates different aspects of itself, or it splits into different distinct personalities to protect the core self. This is where this comes out. And this is a very exaggerated form of this. I feel like we all have that to a degree, but not as exaggerated as people with DID through their trauma. So this switching can lead to them having different handwriting. When they have one alter, they have a particular handwriting, and then when they switch, it changes, and that could be interesting. Different postures, different mannerisms, different medical conditions. In the past, it's been reported some alters might have diabetes, and then they'll test the same person when a different alter's there and they don't have it. Things just miraculously happen like that. That has been talked about. It's not, popular mainstream stuff because that goes against the paradigm. But there has been different cases of strange manifestations like this. And this is similar to what I've seen with shamans or psychics or mediums who channel different spirits, perhaps, and they display different mannerisms. So whether this is a spiritual thing, whether this is a psychological thing, it doesn't really matter. What you have to know is the self splits. Now, the inner child can be seen as a universal alter, an alter that we all have. One that can't be ignored, one that definitely comes out. And you might look back in your history and have noticed certain events where perhaps you regress back to childhood behavior, or someone near you. Maybe you saw a friend or someone who was an adult acting like a child. I remember a few years ago, I was at this airport and I saw this grandma, and she missed her flight because, she couldn't read the ticket properly or whatever it might be. And she just basically started crying. And it was really strange to see because this lady was probably like 80 years old. But in that moment when I saw her, she looked like a little girl, like a 6-year-old girl, because she regressed back to that childhood state. And you see this a lot with older people. As they get older, sometimes they remove their defenses and start displaying behaviors of children where they're crying more, or they're more emotional or more frantic. That's a natural thing that happens as those barriers, those illusions that we put up disappear and dissipate. You might have seen someone when they were upset crawl up in this fetal position here, or cover themselves up, or screaming and yelling or acting irrationally. That is a momentary relapse into the childhood self. Sometimes I watch MMA fights, and often when a fighter is actually getting smashed, they might crawl up into a ball, into a fetal position defensively and not even be defending themselves. This is like a very deep, unconscious response that stems from childhood when we felt safe in that position. A few years back, we saw Will Smith get on stage and slap Chris Rock. In this moment, he was under the spell of an amygdala hijack 100%. He did not have control over his body. Little Will Smith, that was 5 years old or 6 years old, came out and took over and slapped Chris Rock, because the adult version of him would never do that, knowing the effect it would have on his reputation, the effect it would have on his bank account, how people would be making fun of him for years. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an automatic decision. And this is what happens. That's a very obvious way of seeing how the inner child can take over, in the same way as DID alters take over someone with DID. But sometimes the childhood needs are more subtle, especially the need for love that a lot of us had when we were younger. And then they dictate our career decisions and our choices in a more subtle way, not as obvious as Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, but perhaps the path we take in business, perhaps the things we buy, the partner we have. A lot of these things we do are to cover up childhood wounds. The person that pops in mind is Conor McGregor, who has been doing lots of stuff over the years. Clearly he has some unresolved childhood forces that are creating a lot of issues in his life. Lately he's been running for mayor or president of Ireland. Like, it definitely seems like a child is trying to get something. Sometimes it's the love of the father, sometimes the love of the mother, sometimes it's because they were bullied. You see all the time in adults who haven't addressed these issues. So how can we heal our inner child? We talked about what it is, how it behaves almost like an altar, how it dictates a lot of our life decisions. To heal your inner child, you need to be in an altered state of consciousness. You can't meet your inner child in an ordinary state of consciousness. So altered state of consciousness, sometimes known as non-ordinary state of reality, is where you can commune or have a dialogue with your inner child. This is because the inner child is an aspect of your subconscious mind. You can't access your subconscious mind typically in normal brain wave patterns, normal states of awareness. It needs to be in this altered, almost trance-like state. So you can heal your inner child through dream work, especially through the interpretation of your dreams, through understanding your own dream symbols, or if you want to take it one step higher, lucid dreaming and actually engaging with the dream and asking direct questions to your dream. You can even do dream incubation to get specific details about what your inner child needs or what your inner child's lacking or what things you need to work through. That's an advanced method, but that's also one of my favorite methods because you're dealing directly with the subconscious. Holotropic breathwork or other forms of breathwork are powerful. I haven't done holotropic breathwork myself, but I've heard good things about it. Holotropic breathwork is basically when you are in a group setting, you have a sitter and you're doing deep breathing exercises for multiple hours. It's a whole process. And what happens is when you do these deep breathing exercises, you, after some time, go into an altered state of consciousness similar to psychedelics, ayahuasca, etc., where you can then engage with your inner child and other things in this altered state. Shamanic journeying is powerful. Shamanic journeying, where you can go on a journey and interact with spirit animals or your inner child, or get certain messages from different aspects of yourself. Carl Jung also has active imagination, which is somewhat similar to shamanic journeying, but perhaps the more plain method, the more psychological aspect, where it's a lot more active and you know what you're going to be dealing with a lot of times because you prepare before it. Psychedelics you can use, but you have to be very, very careful. I often talk about the dangers of psychedelics, especially the unintegrated use of psychedelics or the escapism use of psychedelics a lot of people engage in. If you're going to use psychedelics for this type of stuff, you need to work with someone who is a good facilitator in that aspect. I haven't got experience with that. Automatic writing can also be incredibly productive in getting answers. Some other ways you can use is journaling with specific questions and observing your responses and mining for gold. You can also bring aspects of your childhood into your present reality, things that you enjoyed doing when you were younger, and bring those things back into your adult life to make you whole. It doesn't necessarily have to be something direct from your childhood. So if you like building sandcastles, it doesn't mean you have to build sandcastles as an adult. Perhaps you need to start a real estate empire. Perhaps you need to do something creative, be a builder of apps or systems or whatever engages your mind. So a lot of the same principles can be brought into the present world. And a lot of times that can be beneficial in a multitude of ways. You can end up making a lot of money, finding amazing friendships and companions through that exploration. A great book for you to check out on this topic is Healing the Shame That Binds You by the late John Bradshaw. He talks about inner child work. He does the coming home exercise, which I've shared with lots of people, and that's been incredibly powerful. There's not one person I've seen do this exercise and not cry as a result. If you want to go deeper into inner child work, if this stuff resonates with you, check out my inner child workshop, which I will link down in the description or in the comment section. Basically has 6 exercises that will help you develop a relationship with your inner child. This is the type of stuff that isn't taught at school, but it's the stuff that once you do it, you will have it for life, and you can use as many times as needed. Worksheets to integrate the lessons, powerful tools that you can use for life. The Leaving Home meditation I talked about just previously by John Bradshaw, except it's read by me, a guided meditation. More book recommendations for you to dive deeper. And you can literally begin creating a relationship with your inner child before today ends. And it could be the greatest healing or blessing you can give to yourself this year. So check that out if you feel called to do it. But regardless of what you do, it is important to take care of your inner child. We need more integrated adults as we move forward in this crazy, crazy world. Peace.